Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about a subject I like. It's got a little football vernacular. I'm a football guy. We did a lot of playing in the red zone, right? We often talk about the retirement red zone. Marc, what is the retirement red zone for our listeners out there?
Well, I explain it to my clients as basically it's the 5 years before you want to retire, and it's the 5 years after you actually do retire, which is the most important part of the retirement plan that we have for you. And the game changes just like it does in the NFL. We have you have a little more leniency and a little more freedom when you're at the 40-yard line and the 50-yard line, but once you get down and you're about to score, things tighten up for you. And that's when we really need to shift our strategies and maybe to a more secure and safe retirement.
What does that look like, Dalton? I mean, in football, hey, the field condenses. You've got defense has less field to cover, so there's more risk. There's more defenders in a compressed part of the field. What are the risk factors that come into play for someone that's in the retirement red zone?
I mean, ultimately, the biggest one is market risk and taking a couple hits and having a negative sequence of returns. And when you have 5 years left, whether it's in year 3 of your red zone or year 2, if you take a couple years back to back of hits, I mean, the example of early 2000s, I mean, the retirees in 2000 through 3 basically retiring on, in some cases, probably nearly half of what they thought they were going to retire on 3 years prior. So The importance of not having all the eggs in that bucket. So if that does happen, and again, nobody knows when and if that will happen again, but minimizing that risk so that doesn't happen in that red zone.
Sure. And, conventional wisdom, Marc, we often hear, oh, you move from stocks to bonds as you get close to retirement. I think 2022 with the spike in interest rates, I think people were reminded that there's a little thing out there called interest rate risk. Maybe speak to that because, maybe throwing money in bonds isn't necessarily the cure-all end-all for protecting your retirement, right?
Well, yeah, I think the safe play was, hey, I'm gonna go from stocks to bonds, and people found out bonds are not as secure as what they thought when people started losing in bonds. With some of our strategies, we have the 0% floor where you cannot lose money, and any gains that we have get locked in. That's really the strategy, in my opinion, that we need to shift to. It's there are guarantees with our strategies.
Right, and that 0% floor you mentioned, I mean, really it just means you never have to make up a loss, right?
Correct.
The biggest challenge to folks is sequence of returns risk. When they hit that red zone like Dalton talked about, if you get, you can have the same average return, 2 different people, and they can have the same average return over a 10-year period, but have entirely different results in terms of how their retirement looks, depending on what order those returns came in. And, that lost decade of 2000 to 2009 is a great example when you had a 10-year S&P annualized return of minus 1%. Oh, by the way, that wasn't factoring in taxes and or, money management fees if you were paying 1% or 1.5% out there for your money manager. So folks that retired in 2000 had a drastically different picture than what they maybe envisioned a couple years before. And that's not what we want for our clients, right? We want certainty.
Well, I think another thing that people often don't realize, if I lose 10% of my portfolio and I gain 10% the next year, I'm not back to even. I have more gains to make up to get where I need to be in that following year.
So I love the illustration of, hey, in your example there, losing 10 and gaining 10. Well, that's a 0 over 2 years.
Right.
You had a 0. No, you didn't. If you have $1 million and you lose, say, 20%, you're down to 800.
Correct.
Well, now you got to make 25% the next year on your 800 to get back to $1 million. And yet the mathematician will tell you, well, geez, you lost 20, you gained 25. That's an average return of 2.5%. Well, guess what? I'm no better off than I was a year ago, right?
Correct.
So Dalton, when we talk about the 0% floor, I guess, what does that look like for folks as they're into the retirement?
Whether it's an income strategy or an account focused strategy that we're using, both have 0% floors. And from the income perspective, what that's doing is, one, it's creating a guaranteed income stream for them so that they don't have to worry about where those dollars are coming from. If the market's down in those other investments, the traditional type of buckets, they know that they have this mailbox money that's there for them every year. So whatever percentage they may be pulling out of those buckets, maybe they can wean off those if they take a hit. In those market-based investments because they have these income strategies.
Right, and with the income annuities, kind of a personal pension, they have a guaranteed stream of income, but if it's an increasing type, when we have difference where you can do a level income or an increasing income, what I like about the increasing income is you can still tie your return to the market. Hey, you never can go down on your income, but if the market goes up and we have some good returns, you can actually increase your income and lock that in, right?
Right. Yeah. The lowest the following year, the lowest that you'll ever be paid was what you were paid the year prior.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what your minimum will be the next year. And if the market goes up, that's bonus dollars for you, and you're growing. And once you lock in that gain, that's your new floor.
And I think it creates certainty, right? I tell my clients, hey, you'll never have to wake up that next morning, look at your portfolio and see how much money you lost. You're only going to see how much money you gained. And not only a 0% floor, but we can allocate and get you into some investment strategies where you actually are guaranteed some type of positive return if we use our fixed interest rates.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing with, we talked about, early on about people having money in CDs. Well, guess what? Some of these annuity products right now have really attractive fixed accounts that you, as an option, you can put it in there and, maybe get a 5% return. And here's a great thing. It's locked in for, the next decade at least, right? So even if interest rates were to come back down here at the end of the year or into the next, 2025, you're locked into that higher rate. So now is the time when we talk about, refining your annuity, now is the time to look at that. And it's because of interest rates. So thanks for your perspective on that.